At my birthday dinner, I opened the card from my parents expecting a gift. Instead, it had a $10 bill inside, and my sister laughed. Don't spend it all in one place. The table erupted in laughter while I sat frozen, already calculating how I'd make them pay back every penny they owed me. I, 32M, sat at the head of the table at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant downtown that I'd reserved 3 weeks in advance, and watched my family pretend they'd done me a favor by showing up. The waiter had just brought out the appetizers I'd ordered for everyone. Expensive stuff, because tonight was supposed to be special. My birthday. The big 3-2. My parents sat to my left, my sister and her husband to my right, and my girlfriend across from me, her hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine in that way that said she knew something was about to go sideways. The envelope sat next to my plate, cream-colored with my name written in Mom's looping handwriting. I'd seen my sister slip it to Mom when they arrived, watched the knowing glance between them, felt that familiar twist in my gut that told me I should have known better than to expect anything different. But hope is a stupid, persistent thing, and some part of me had thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year they'd remember that I existed as more than just a punchline or a backup plan. My sister raised her wine glass, the third one she'd ordered in the 40 minutes since we'd arrived, and suggested I open the card. Her smile was sharp, predatory, the same one she'd worn when we were kids, and she was about to tell Mom I'd been the one who broke the lamp, the window, the trust. I picked up the envelope with fingers that felt disconnected from my body, aware that everyone at the table was watching me. My girlfriend's hand tightened on mine briefly before letting go. Inside the card was a generic birthday message, something about another year older and wiser, and beneath it a single $10 bill. $10. I stared at it, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing, and then my sister delivered her line about not spending it all in one place, and the table erupted. Dad's booming laugh, Mom's high-pitched giggle, my brother-in-law's snort into his bourbon. Even the couple at the next table glanced over, wondering what was so hilarious. I sat frozen, the bill in my hand, doing math in my head. $23,418. That's what they owed me. Not in some metaphorical sense, not in some vague way about emotional support or childhood neglect. Actual money. Money I'd loaned, money I'd fronted, money I'd paid when they'd come to me with tears and emergencies and promises they'd never kept. The first time was 8 years ago. Dad had called me at 2 in the morning, his voice thick with something I'd convinced myself was regret, telling me he needed $5,000 or they'd lose the house. I'd just started my job at the tech company, was finally making decent money after years of scraping by, and I transferred it the next morning without hesitation. He'd promised to pay me back within 3 months. I was still waiting. Then there was my sister's wedding 4 years ago. $15,000 because she'd blown through her budget and needed someone to cover the photographer, the flowers, the fucking ice sculpture she absolutely had to have. Mom had cried when she asked, said it would mean the world to her baby girl, said I was the only one they could count on. I'd paid. My sister had never even said thank you. The list went on. Mom's medical bills that turned out to be for cosmetic procedures. Dad's business venture that folded in 6 months. My sister's down payment on her car because her credit was shot. Small loans here and there. A few hundred every couple of months for emergencies that were never quite emergencies. Always with promises. Always with assurances that family took care of family. My girlfriend excused herself to the restroom, and I knew it was because she couldn't watch this anymore. She'd told me last month that I needed to stop letting them use me, that I needed to stand up for myself, that at some point I had to realize they weren't going to change. I defended them then, made excuses, said they were just going through a rough patch. Looking at that $10 bill, I felt something inside me crack open. I slipped the bill back into the card and set it aside, ordered another round of drinks for the table because that's what I did. I paid. I always paid. The waiter brought out our entrees, dishes I'd selected carefully because I knew everyone's preferences, and we ate while my family talked around me. My sister complained about her job, the one she'd gotten through my connection, the one that paid twice what she deserved. Dad talked about his latest idea, another business venture he was convinced would finally be the one. Mom asked if I'd be willing to help with the fundraiser she was organizing, volunteered my time without asking if I had any to give. I smiled. I nodded. I played my part. And in my head, I calculated. The dinner ended with me picking up the $300 tab while my sister took a photo of the table for her social media. captioning it something about family time and feeling blessed. They hugged me on the way out, wished me happy birthday again, asked when we could do this again soon. I told them I'd check my calendar. My girlfriend drove us home in silence, her hand on my knee, waiting for me to say something. When we got back to my apartment, I went straight to my office and pulled out the file folder I kept in my desk drawer. Every loan, every payment, every transfer documented with bank statements and text messages and emails. $23,000 for $118, verified and logged. I kept records without really knowing why, some instinct telling me that one day I might need proof. My girlfriend brought me coffee and sat on the edge of the desk, her eyes on the papers spread out in front of me. She asked what I was going to do, and I told her I was going to get my money back. Every penny. Not because I needed it, though that would be nice. Because I needed them to understand that I wasn't their safety net anymore, that I wasn't the family ATM they could ridicule while simultaneously draining dry. The plan took shape over the next week. I knew my family well enough to understand their weaknesses, their pressure points, the things they valued more than integrity. My sister cared about her image, her social standing, the way people perceived her perfect life. My parents cared about their reputation in their community, their church, their circle of friends who thought they were upstanding citizens. I started with a simple email to all three of them, sent from a new address I'd created specifically for this purpose. The message was straightforward. I outlined every loan, every payment, every dollar they owed me. I attached copies of the bank transfers, screenshots of our text conversations, emails where they'd promised repayment. I gave them 2 weeks to come up with a repayment plan. If they didn't, I told them I'd be forced to take further action. My sister called within an hour, her voice shrill with indignation. She accused me of being petty, of ruining her birthday gift joke, of not understanding what family meant. I listened to her rant without interrupting, then calmly reminded her that the $15,000 she owed me for her wedding would cover a lot of therapy to work through her apparent confusion about what family actually meant. She hung up on me. Dad called next, tried the guilt angle. He reminded me of all the times he'd been there for me, conveniently forgetting that most of those times involved him asking me for something. He said I was breaking Mom's heart, that she couldn't believe her son would be so cruel. I asked him when he planned to make his first payment. He sputtered and disconnected. Mom tried the silent treatment, which was almost refreshing. No calls, no texts, just a palpable wave of disapproval radiating from her corner of the universe. My sister posted vague social media updates about betrayal and toxic people and how sometimes your real family was the one you chose. I screenshot every single one. The 2 weeks passed without a word from any of them. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the anger I felt, not at their refusal to pay, but at myself for ever expecting they would. These were people who'd watched me struggle through college while funding my sister's shopping addiction. These were people who'd borrowed money for emergencies while taking vacations I couldn't afford. These were people who'd given me a $10 bill for my birthday while owing me enough to put a down payment on a house. Phase 2 began on a Monday morning. I'd spent the weekend with my girlfriend's family, normal people who actually liked each other, and the contrast had sharpened my resolve. I filed a claim in small claims court for the full amount, knowing I'd probably only recover a fraction, but needing them to understand I was serious. The filing was public record. Their friends would see it. Their church community would see it. The perfect image they'd cultivated would crack. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My sister called me screaming, her carefully constructed composure shattered. She told me I'd ruined her life, that everyone was talking about her, that she'd had to quit her position on the church board because people were asking questions. I reminded her that she could make it all go away by paying what she owed. She told me to rot in hell. Dad showed up at my apartment, red-faced and furious, demanding I drop the lawsuit. He said family didn't sue family, that I was making us all look bad, that he'd never forgive me for this humiliation. I asked if he'd brought a check. He hadn't. I closed the door in his face. Mom tried a different approach, sending my aunt to mediate. My aunt sat in my living room and suggested we work this out quietly, without all this public drama. I showed her the documentation, walked her through every loan and broken promise. She got quiet, said she hadn't realized it was so much, asked why I'd never said anything. I told her I had. Many times. No one had listened. The court date approached, and I knew they weren't going to show up. They'd ignore it, hope it went away, Count on me backing down at the last minute because that's what I always did. But I'd changed. That $10 bill had been a catalyst, a moment of clarity that stripped away years of conditioning and obligation and misplaced loyalty. 3 days before the hearing, my sister's husband called. He'd been quiet through all of this, and I'd wondered what he thought about his wife's family drama. Turned out he'd thought plenty. He told me he'd been pushing her to pay me back for years, that he'd offered to loan her the money himself, that she'd refused on principle. He said he was sorry, that he understood why I was doing this, and that he'd convinced her to agree to a payment plan if I'd dropped the suit. I considered it. Part of me wanted to see them in court, wanted a judge to validate what I already knew. But the smarter part of me recognized that getting paid was better than being right. We negotiated terms. $1,500 a month until the debt was cleared, automatic transfers so I wouldn't have to ask or remind or chase. He'd oversee it personally, make sure she followed through. I agreed to drop the lawsuit contingent on the first payment clearing. Dad called the next day, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. He asked what it would take for me to stop this. I told him the same terms. Monthly payments, automatic transfers, no excuses. He tried to negotiate, wanted to pay less, wanted more time. I told him the offer expired in 24 hours. He agreed. Mom never called. My aunt told me she was devastated, that she couldn't understand how her son had turned into someone so cold. I asked my aunt to tell her I'd learned from the best. Update 1. It's been 3 months since I posted, and people have been asking for an update. The payments have been coming in like clockwork, which honestly surprised me more than anything else in this entire mess. $1,500 from my sister's account on the 1st of each month, $1,000 from my parents on the 15th. My brother-in-law has kept his word about overseeing things, and I've gotten exactly zero communication from my family otherwise. The silence has been strange. I didn't realize how much mental energy I'd been spending on managing their expectations, anticipating their needs, preparing for their next crisis. Without that constant background noise, my life feels different. Clearer. My girlfriend and I started looking at houses last month, something I couldn't have considered before because I never knew when my savings would need to bail someone out. Work has been better too. I got promoted, which came with a significant raise, and for the first time in my adult life, that money is actually mine. I'm not holding it in reserve for someone else's emergency. I'm not feeling guilty about spending it on things I want. I bought a new car last week, nothing crazy expensive, but nice enough that I felt proud driving it off the lot. The old me would have felt selfish. The new me feels free. My sister unfriended me on all social media, which I discovered when my cousin mentioned not seeing my posts anymore. I checked, found I'd been blocked across the board, and felt nothing but relief. No more carefully curated photos of her perfect life, no more passive-aggressive posts that may or may not have been about me. Just silence. But the interesting development came last week. My aunt called, the same one who'd tried to mediate before. She said my mom had been in the hospital, nothing serious but enough to scare her, and she was asking for me. My aunt said maybe this could be a chance to rebuild, to move past all the ugliness. I asked if Mom had stopped the automatic payments. My aunt said no. I told her I'd think about it. I haven't gone to see her. My girlfriend thinks I should, says that one day I might regret not taking the opportunity. But I keep thinking about that $10 bill, about the laughter, about 32 years of being the backup plan. And I wonder what exactly I'm supposed to rebuild toward. The money keeps coming in. In another year and a half, the debt will be cleared. I'm not sure what happens then. Update 2. 6 more months have passed, and the situation has evolved in ways I didn't anticipate. The payments continued without interruption until 3 weeks ago, when my father called me for the first time since this all started. His voice sounded different, older somehow, and he asked if we could meet for coffee. No demands, no guilt trips, just a simple request. I was suspicious but curious, so I agreed. We met at a diner halfway between our places, neutral territory. He looked smaller than I remembered, more tired. He ordered coffee but barely touched it, and for the first few minutes, we sat in uncomfortable silence. Then he told me Mom's hospital scare had been worse than my aunt let on. She'd had a minor stroke, recovered mostly, but it had shifted something in both of them. He said they'd been doing a lot of thinking about priorities, about the way they'd live their lives, about their children. He didn't apologize, not directly, but he asked me to tell him everything. Every loan, every broken promise, every time I'd felt used or dismissed. He wanted to understand how it had gotten so bad without them noticing. So I told him. 3 decades worth of feeling like an afterthought, of being valued for my wallet but not my presence, of watching my sister get celebrated while I got a $10 bill in mockery. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he sat with it for a while before speaking. He said he'd failed me as a father, that he'd convinced himself providing money when I asked was the same as being present, that he'd let my sister's neediness overshadow my independence. He said he understood if I never wanted a relationship with them again, but if I was willing, he'd like to try to build something real, something that wasn't about money. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him it was too late, that you can't undo 30 years of damage with one conversation over coffee. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being a kid who just wanted his dad to notice him, wanted to believe people could change. I told him I needed time. He nodded, said he understood, and told me the remaining balance on their debt would be paid in full by the end of the month. He'd taken a loan against his retirement account. He said he needed to clear the financial obligation before we could even think about building anything else, that otherwise it would always be between us. I asked about my sister's portion. He said that was between me and her. True to his word, the payment came through. $11,000, clearing his and Mom's debt completely. It showed up in my account on a Tuesday morning, and I stared at the notification for a long time, trying to figure out what I felt. Not triumph, not vindication, just a kind of hollow completion, like finishing a book I'd never enjoyed reading. My sister's payments have continued on schedule, but we still haven't spoken. My brother-in-law sends me a brief email each month confirming the transfer, nothing more. I heard through my cousin that she's pregnant, expecting their first kid in the spring. I felt obligated to acknowledge it somehow, so I sent a gift card to a baby store with a neutral congratulations message. She didn't respond. I've seen my father twice more since that first coffee meeting. Short visits, careful conversations about safe topics like work and weather. He asks questions about my life now, actually listens to the answers. Mom hasn't reached out directly, but my aunt tells me she's working through her own process of understanding what happened. I'm not holding my breath for a reconciliation there. The truth is, getting my money back didn't fix anything the way I thought it might. The financial wound is healing, but there are other wounds underneath, older ones that have nothing to do with bank transfers and broken promises. I'm learning to be okay with that, learning that sometimes justice doesn't come with resolution, just with boundaries. My girlfriend and I close on our house next month. It's a small place with a yard and good light, the kind of home I'd always imagined but never thought I could afford. We're having a housewarming party, and I've invited my father. Not my mother, not my sister, just him. It feels like the right amount of bridge to build for now. The debt will be fully cleared in 8 more months. After that, I don't know what happens. Maybe my sister and I find a way back to something resembling a relationship. Maybe my mother and I have our own reckoning. Maybe none of it matters because I've already built a new family from friends and chosen connections that don't require me to prove my worth in dollars. That $10 bill is still in my desk drawer. I kept it, though I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe as a reminder of the moment everything changed. Maybe as evidence that I survived something I didn't think I would. Maybe just because throwing it away felt like letting them off the hook one more time. I'm not the same person who sat frozen at that birthday dinner. I'm not sure the new person is better, exactly, just clearer about what he will and won't accept. The revenge I'd imagined, the satisfaction of watching them suffer consequences, turned out to be less sweet than I'd hoped. But the freedom of not being their backup plan anymore, that's been worth every uncomfortable conversation and burned bridge. Sometimes my girlfriend asks if I regret how I handled it, if I wish I tried something different first. I tell her no. Not because I handled it perfectly, but because I handled it. I stopped accepting less than I deserved. I stopped pretending that unconditional love meant being a doormat. The money was never really about the money. It was about everything the money represented, every time I wasn't valued, every moment I was taken for granted. Getting it back didn't heal those wounds, but it stopped them from getting deeper. And maybe that's enough.